Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of AKP Sports Talk. That's Ari. I'm Korea, and obviously, Ari. We were a little disappointed to see our Seahawks kind of go down the way they went in the second half. But a very just coming to tell you what a very interesting wild card weekend we just had. How you doing after a very interesting first round of the playoffs? Now only 8 teams left.
Yeah, I was a bit worried that we would see a good amount of kind of lopsided games this weekend. So they were definitely a lot better than I thought they would be heading into the weekend. Obviously, we'll get into each of the games, but yeah, it was overall a good weekend. I think we're going to see even better games, in the divisional round. We're also less than 30 days away till pitching catches report for spring training, so that's right around the corner. And then we're less than 2 months away from March Madness, so a lot to look forward to coming up.
Yeah, obviously, it's definitely the new year, and with the new year, a lot of excitement for baseball. With pitchers and catchers reporting soon, and the still kind of looming free agents that are still out there. Getting near the halfway point. Getting close to the All-Star game for the basketball season. March Madness is a couple months away, which is kind of crazy to say that it's already pretty much right around the corner. And then obviously the football season is winding down, but we're going to get right into the thick of things and go kind of debrief of what was a really wild card weekend. The first game, obviously the Niners and Seahawks, and for the first, the Seahawks fans, they had us in the first half. They were looking really impressive. The defense was bending and not breaking. That's kind of been the mantra all season. Excuse me, just that bend don't break mentality. Niners were just, not really executing when they got into the red zone. And that was one of the things the Seahawks were doing so well throughout the first half, and ended up in a 17-16 lead with the late hit from, I believe it was Jimmy Ward on Geno Smith when he was scrambling for some extra yards. And, look at Seattle had all the momentum heading into the first half, and then coming out of the second half, it was all 49ers. That's when the Niners playbook really started to open. Deebo Samuel, he had that big 74-yard touchdown pass catch. And then obviously there was, the controversial Jonathan Abram holding the ankle, just a bunch of emotion, getting later and later in that game. But the Niners did go out and rout pretty much the Seahawks in that second half. Seahawks only getting 6 points. All right, look, a lot of people were kind of expecting this to happen. People were thinking, the Niners were going to easily just run through the Seahawks. And, throughout the first, part of the game when the Niners were up 10-0, that's what it kind of looked like. And then, Seattle got their offense back together. And, the defense was, bending and not breaking, forcing, the Niners to punt or, not converting. And, the offense really got themselves together, especially on that Geno Smith dot to DK Metcalf down the sideline for that game-leading score. So, look, it was not the result we wanted, but kind of the result Seahawks fans were expecting. They did put out a good performance in the first half. What are your takeaways from, a game where Seattle was pretty much outplayed offensively? Brock Purdy had himself a fantastic day. He threw for over 350 yards, 3 touchdowns. McCaffrey had over 100 all-purpose yards, and we knew he was going to be involved. That was kind of the expectation for this Niners team against the Seattle Seahawks. But, for the first half, it looked great for Seattle. So what do you think? What are your takeaways from this game? And now the Niners are hosting a playoff game in the next round.
Yeah, it wasn't even really just the first half. It was almost 3 quarters, because even though the Niners scored to open the third quarter, the Seahawks and Geno were driving themselves and, in position to either cut the deficit to 3 points or take the lead back. And really the game-changing play wasn't the fumble. It was I think it was Damian Lewis, an eligible man downfield. It would have been 3rd and 1 for the Seahawks inside, I think the Niners 15. And then he got called, and so he got called for an eligible man downfield, so that made it 3rd and 12 instead of 3rd and 1 at that point. And then that's when it's an obvious passing situation, obviously. And so that's what led to the pressure. So I think he was called for 2 or 3 of those, Damian Lewis, and they were kind of that one was like borderline. I think another one was pretty obvious, but yeah, I mean, I've been talking about San Francisco as my Super Bowl team for a while now, so I expected the final result, but the fact that the Seahawks were in it as long as they were did make it sting a little bit more. It's one thing if they're just gonna get blown out, like it looked like you said when they're down 10-0. But I mean, even with the 2-3 outs to open the game, they are still doing what they have to do to keep staying ahead of the chain, 3rd and short. And on the first touchdown drive, that's what they did. It was like a 5-6 minute drive, I think, that they're just kind of continuously getting positive yards. And then you had the 50-yard bomb to Metcalf over Charvarius Ward that gave them the lead. And then you mentioned the late hit on Jimmy Ward, I think it was, that gave them the lead going into halftime. And it was really the fourth quarter where everything changed. I mean, even the third quarter, like I said, they scored, but the Seahawks, were driving themselves. So I guess we can take that into what's next for Geno Smith. And it sounds like more than likely he is going to be back with the Seahawks next year. Whether they franchise tag him or give him like a 2-year extension is kind of the big question. The Seahawks have the number 5 pick, so if they were going to draft a quarterback, they have to trade up. Using their 5, I think they have the 20 pick, I think is the other pick. Or they just stay at 5, roll with Geno for another year or 2 and draft defense with that number 5 pick, or even trade back that number 5. Korea, what's kind of your stance with Geno moving forward, as well as what you think the Seahawks should do, with those draft picks, whether that's, defense, quarterback, trade back, or whatever?
You see, this one's been hard for me because this is a business, and sometimes you got to do what you got to do because it's a business. And I will say Geno definitely proved all the doubters wrong. He had himself a great season. He set the single passing yard single season record in Seattle in his first year. He led the league in completion percentage. Like, he was balling. And, it all comes back to the infamous quote from week 1. They wrote me off, but I am right back, though. So I believe that this team will definitely try to bring him back first. I feel like that's going to be the priority this offseason, is addressing that. And with that, potentially shipping Drew Lock somewhere where he could try and earn a position to be the starter. I think that would be beneficial for this team. And I think that would be beneficial for Geno Smith, because I feel like he should be, at least getting tagged, or maybe a 2-year deal, so we can work on maybe drafting a QB maybe in the later drafts or the later rounds, that we can develop into someone like a star. Because, as we all said, like, no one expected Russell Wilson to be the star that he is or was in Seattle. I mean, he was a 5th rounder. Everyone kind of blew him off. So that's kind of what I feel like the Seahawks are probably going to be doing with Geno Smith. I've heard so many things about how the Seahawks need to take a QB, and the Seahawks should take a QB, or at least be interested in looking toward Bryce Young, or maybe trading up for CJ Stroud, or maybe even using that 2nd pick to take like Anthony Richardson. And I feel like the priority for this team is bringing back Geno, and I feel that's what's probably going to be best for this team. And I believe, and Geno even said it, I think it was a tweet or something. It was, I think he said it in a press conference or a tweet, saying that, he had a year. It was his first year with the offense, pretty much. And, it was like his first full season as a starter in the NFL, I believe, since he was a Jet. And that was a very, very long time ago. And he perfectly gels with the Shane Waldron offense. And I feel that game manager, someone who can run, but also throw downfield very well. And Geno has been throwing dots all season. So I feel like what's next for Geno Smith, I even saw this thing on TikTok where Richard Sherman, of all people, was talking about a potential trade with the Baltimore Ravens for Lamar Jackson, and I was a little confused, but at the same time, intrigued at that offer. But I feel like we would have to give up a little more. And I just don't know if we want to pay someone that much money, especially for that kind of injury that Lamar Jackson has, pretty much almost the same as RG3's, which ended his career. So, but that's all that aside, I feel like Geno Smith is definitely going to be the quarterback in 2023. Uh, Beyond that, I don't know. I feel like they should definitely at least tag him or maybe give him a 2-year extension. But I feel like anything more than that may be a little bit of a reach just because of the direction this team is going in and how young it is. I mean, we want to be one of the younger teams in the league, obviously, and Geno Smith, obviously, no discredit to him, but he's not the youngest guy, and his legs aren't as mobile as like a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud per se. But it'd definitely be very interesting to see how much money or what they're kind of looking for in terms of either tagging him or giving him a deal in the offseason. So that'll be definitely interesting to look forward to throughout this offseason. But going back to your point about Saturday, I mean, look, it was always an uphill battle, and I can say this for myself, and I don't know about you, but most Seahawks fans were just pretty happy, to just be there. And for the first half, it looked like it was just this team that was just having fun. This team was just doing what they do. They play fun football, and obviously the Niners are definitely a Super Bowl contender, and they looked like that on Saturday. And no discredit to them, but they definitely have an easy matchup. Against a Seahawks team that's kind of sputtered into the playoffs. With a rough game against the Rams, but but the Niners offense definitely did click in the second half. One of the more scarier defenses, obviously, with Nick Bosa, defensive player of the year candidate. And then Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw. You mentioned Charvarius Ward, who got cooked by DK. I'm sorry. What you say? I mean, last time we saw that matchup, DK couldn't even get a catch. This time he was getting 10 receptions for, I believe, over like 170 yards and a touchdown. So Charvarius Ward got cooked. Let's just say how it is.
He had two because he had the late garbage time.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Well, yeah. Still two TDs on him. Yeah, that's on your head. That's on your head. So moving on to the Saturday night game, and oh God, I mean, for someone who had Chargers -1.5, this was absolutely heartbreaking to watch. But for anyone who believed in the Jags, this was one of the greatest games that we've ever seen from Wild Card Weekend. Everyone probably knows the story. Chargers were up big. They were controlling this game. Trevor Lawrence had four interceptions in the first half. Some of them weren't. Some of them were his fault. Some of them weren't. But still, it was looking very bad for the Chargers. Very bad for the Jags. They couldn't find any rhythm. The Chargers, even though the Jags defense was getting bending, not breaking later in the second quarter, they still were getting points on the board, and it was 27-0. And it looked like the Jags were just going to be this team who had this great momentum, just all collapse, in a playoff game in the first half. But then the late first half TD comes in, and that's momentum, and that momentum carried into the third quarter, where the Jaguars slowly kept coming back, and they put up another touchdown. Okay, it's 27-13. Okay, now we have kind of a ball game, 22 possessions, and it's early in the third, and they slowly start coming back, and the Chargers aren't really doing anything offensively. The offense completely shut down. I mean, it was inexistent throughout that second half. The Jaguars slowly chipped back, and the offense was clicking. Trevor Lawrence was doing his thing. He was finding Zay Jones, Marvin Jones, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, all the receivers that he's been using all year, and it pretty much culminated into the collapse of the Los Angeles Chargers. Joey Bosa was pretty irate with the officiating. That's here nor there, but eventually the Chargers did collapse to the Jags with a game-winning field goal from Riley Patterson to send the Jaguars up to the next round to play the Chiefs. But Ari, look, I mean, you can say this is one of the greatest comebacks. You can say this is one of the bigger collapses. You can say that the Chargers choked. You can say that the Jaguars just had them in the first half, like the Seahawks did. And we saw Trevor Lawrence's tweet, that famous tweet, like they had us in the first half. So, but what do you think? Was it a Jaguars, just was Doug Peterson's speech that legendary at halftime for them to come back from that, or was just the confidence of the Los Angeles Chargers getting to them, or what happened? What happened, Ari? Explain it to me.
I mean, as the Chargers lead continued to grow in the first half, even when it was 27-0, you still couldn't help but think in the back of your mind, are the Chargers going to charger this up? And because obviously we know that they're known for maybe not blowing leads this big, but still just, blowing leads at certain times in big games. And I think that you mentioned the touchdown right before halftime was huge for the Jacksons to get anything on the board, any sort of momentum. And then we see the stop and score out of half to bring it to 13. And then the Chargers take a field goal to go back up 16. Jack's touchdown, but they missed the 2-point conversion, so that made it a 10-point game. And then Cameron Dicker missed the field goal, and that left it open for a 10-point game with like 8 minutes left. And then the rest was history. So I think it's just one of those cases where everything went right for the Jags and everything went wrong for the Chargers. I do think it's interesting how, you would think with that big of a lead for the Chargers at one point that they would have ran the ball a lot, and yet Eckler only saw 13 carries as a whole backfield. Eckler and Kelly saw 20 carries combined. ETN saw 20 carries. You'd think the team that was down by 27 would have ran the ball, a lot less than the team up by 27, but they basically saw the same amount of, running back carries. So, Herbert had 43 attempts. And yeah, I mean, it just kind of goes back to, you think with a 27-point lead at one point that the quarterback wouldn't have that many attempts and you wouldn't have the same amount of running back carries. So, yeah, that's just why I think that's one of the big reasons why what happened. I think the Chargers, they fired their offensive coordinator, Lombardi, but it sounds like they're going to keep Staley, at least right now. That's what it seems like. But yeah, I mean, you have to credit the Jaguars and Lawrence, not folding after throwing 4 picks. Like you said, not all of them were his fault either. And yeah, the offense just found its rhythm in the second half, obviously. And the defense, like you mentioned, they held their own given the 4 picks. And they had a muffed punt, I believe, too. So 5 turnovers. So the defense did its job. Get all things considered, and the offense was able to pick it up in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, the Jaguars' offense pretty much just revived themselves in that second half. But, I mean, you can also say the Chargers got comfortable, as you mentioned, and then, Dicker with the late missed field goal opportunity. That just, the Chargers were allowing the Jaguars to really come back and, try to at least make this a game. And it definitely was a game. And then, the final drive for the Jags, they're down 30. They're down 30-28, and all they're looking for is just to get in field goal range, and they just slowly move down the field, and they set themselves up perfectly. And you're thinking, like, are the Jaguars really going to do it? And then they did it, and it was just a crazy comeback. Definitely, as you mentioned, Chargers. They fired Lombardi this morning. Definitely a sign that Staley is staying as the coach, but definitely a lot of people were calling for his head to be fired, and after just that. After blowing that huge lead. I mean, I saw on TikTok, I saw one fan was sleeping at halftime. He woke up to see they lost. It's just bad. So Chargers definitely chargered it, but, Jaguars, they definitely, I got to say, Doug Peterson has one hell of a speech, I guess, because they did not give up. And, even going into the half, they were still down 20, and, they get the ball and they just keep moving downfield, and they really did outscore them. I believe it was 24-3 in one half, which is actually ridiculous to really think about. So, yeah, Jacksonville moves on to play the Chiefs on the road. I think that's going to be a really fun game. We'll get into that later in the week. And then the Chargers, obviously, they head on to Cancun, and we may see a little bit more faces leaving leaving the team. Who knows in terms of coaching staff? And yeah, very interesting game. But we're going moving on to the Sunday slate, and in a game where everyone kind of knew that the Bills were going to win, or that the Bills should have won a lot more comfortably. They talk about a team that gave chances away. I mean, the Bills offensively, they played better. Like the Bills, they racked up more yards. They outran them. They outthrew them. On paper, you would say that the Bills should have won this game by at least maybe 14 or 15. But start the third quarter, they have that fumble return by I think it was like Seller, for from that Miami defense, and just all the opportunities. Right, they were already up 17-0 early in the second quarter, and then they turned the ball over, and the Miami Dolphins climbed all the way back to tie the game up late before halftime at 17-all, and then they go into the half up 20-17, and then you think, oh, it's going to be a game. And I feel like this Bills team got exposed. And they got exposed because Josh Allen turned over the ball quite a lot. I mean, three turnovers. Wasn't a clean game in the stat sheet, but, just the fact that the defense did just enough to stop, yes, Skylar Thompson from having himself a career game and a career win on the road in Buffalo. I feel like this game was definitely too close for comfort for the Bills, and now they have to host a playoff game next week. And look, they got exposed. I'm not gonna lie, they got exposed for how many turnovers they had. And yes, one of them turned into a touchdown, but minus this would have been a 10-point game either way. And it's definitely concerning to see that. And you have one of the best offenses in football coming in to your stadium next week, and who honestly did not look great either, but could still beat you on your own turf. So I want to get your opinions on this game. We all kind of thought Bills minus 13.5. That was kind of a lock, and we all knew that Skylar Thompson was not going to get it done. But some way, somehow, the Bills only won by 3. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the turnovers. And Josh Allen threw 2 picks, and he had the 1 fumble. And those 3 turnovers turned to 17 points. And so that was, the big reason why they were in the game. I mean, they scored 14 points, John just, normal drives that, weren't turnovers. And that's kind of been, if you're going to nitpick out, because obviously Josh Allen is great at so many things, but if you're going to, criticize him at one thing, it is turning the ball over and, interceptions on just deep throws that just don't need to be thrown, So, I mean, like you said, we'll get into the games later in the week for this upcoming weekend, but obviously you can't turn the ball over against a team like the Bengals and expect to win. So that would be the big key for them in that game. But, I mean, you have to credit the fight of the Dolphins. Obviously they got the turnovers. I mean, falling down 17-0 early, Thompson threw the early pick. At that point, you think they're going to win by like 30 plus or 25 plus or something like that. So, credit to Thompson and the Dolphins for fighting back. It sounds like they're going to have Tua back next year, probably, but with his concussions, you never really know. But hopefully, he's fully healthy and back next year. And Dolphins should be again a playoff team if Tua stays healthy next year. But yeah, I mean, the Bills, they got the run game going with both Singletary and Cook. Josh Allen hardly ran the ball, which is a little bit of a surprise to see. And then they also had 2 big drops of Dolphins by Hill and Waddle, so they could have had even more points if they didn't have those drops as well. You had the early drop by Waddle that would have put them deep in the Bills territory, and Hill had a drop or 2 as well. So, credit to Dolphins for fighting. I think up to that point, like every 7 seed had been getting crushed since they added that 7 seed, and so they were the first 7 seed to I think cover, I believe. So credit to them for that. Obviously tough environment, third string quarterback, and all of that, and obviously, Josh Allen basically gifted them 3 turnovers, you could say, but you still have to credit them for keeping as close as they did, and they had the Bills on their heels at the very end, down by 3, at like midfield. So obviously, a win is a win, surviving advance and all of that for the Bills. Divisional games are typically always close for the most part. Obviously, the Seahawks 49ers game wasn't, but next week is a new week, and it's irrelevant. Like next week is irrelevant to what happened this past week. So Bills have to move on, and just limit the turnovers at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's kind of definitely been one of the Bills' weaknesses as of recently. We saw in the Patriots game in that final game of the regular season for the Bills. They definitely struggled to keep the turnovers and kind of kept the Patriots in that game. And they did it again. They struggled with the turnovers. Kind of allow the Dolphins to let them have themselves in this game or keep themselves in this game. And you mentioned those 3 turnovers led to 17 points, and winning by 3. Those are 17 points like you should definitely be able to handle offensively. Either it's driving down the field or limiting turnovers in that section, or even the defense forcing a stop. And it was definitely getting a little scary at first. I know when Miami took that lead 24-20 to start the third, definitely was a little scary for the Bills. Trying to get their offense right while they're struggling to really just figure out the deep ball and those 2 interceptions deep. We talked about that as well. But credit to this Miami team, they had heart. And you mentioned this was pretty much one of the few times the 7 seed that was recently introduced to the NFL pretty much either covered the spread or kept the game close and competitive. And meanwhile, we had the Seahawks who were keeping it close at first, but then got blown out in the second half. And, definitely I thought that was going to be happening with Miami. And, Miami still kept it close. And you mentioned, Miami even had a chance late in the fourth, at midfield down by 3. So, you mentioned Tua is probably going to be back and hopefully fully healthy. We don't know any of his concussion protocol issues right now, but I believe that he'll probably be healthy to start the 2023 season. He'll still have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle as well, as we talked about. And, that defense is going to be improving as well. I feel like that's going to be one of the big things this offseason for Miami is improving the defense. So Miami can definitely be a contender in that stacked AFC East division, which is going to be filled with talent next year, I believe. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see. Now heading into, I guess, a lot of people's kind of lock as an upset for the weekend. Dable did it. The Giants, going to Minnesota, and this was the rematch of the game we talked about where Greg Joseph had to hit that 60-yard field goal just to survive against this Giants team. And, the Giants come back knowing that they barely lost. So the confidence is there because they knew they could beat them. And, they performed well offensively. That's been something that we have not said about this Giants team pretty much in the past 3 seasons. This team not performing well offensively. Defensively, they still did what they did. They didn't force any turnovers, but, they made stops when they needed to. And, that was something that, especially on third down, the Vikings on third down could not find anything. But, the offense of the Giants, Daniel Jones led this team in rushing. And he threw for over 300 yards. Yes, the Vikings defense just could not stop it. But some of the play calling that Dable had, and, it really looks like this Giants team is for real. And maybe it's the play calling that Brian Dable brings from Buffalo to New York. But, this was one of the most impressive wins. The Giants had over 400 yards of offense. They were just running all around the Vikings defense. The Vikings, they tried, but, I don't know why you're throwing a 3-yard pass on a 4th and 8 down to TJ Hawkinson. You're down 7. You're trying to come back and tie the game up to force overtime. I don't know what you're doing, Kevin O'Connell, but this is your offense. You need to be throwing the ball deep, and, you haven't done that all day. And I feel, that was kind of one of the reasons as to why the Giants just won, because the Giants knew what to do offensively to stop this Vikings team. And, defensively, they've been doing that all year. And that was kind of the one thing that was kind of holding them back is the offense. And it was great to see that offense really blossom for a big win. And they play the Eagles on, I believe, Saturday in the divisional. So that'll be a fun division matchup. But Ari, look, everyone kind of called it the Giants. They prevailed on the road. The Vikings, I mean, what do you do? I mean, Kirk Cousins, is he the problem? Do you think about potentially moving on from him with this whole quarterback carousel? But even though they just paid that man so much money, and even with all the offensive weapons, we were still talking about how the Vikings, were still not that great defensively, and it proved to be evident. So, I mean, what were your thoughts and reactions from this exciting game in the wild card round?
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Dable and Daniel Jones. I mean, Jones was not literally perfect, but that was about as perfect as a game that you could ask for. No turnovers, 300 plus yards, 2 touchdowns through the air. He got whatever he wanted on the ground, pretty much. You mentioned he led the team with 78 yards rushing. On the Vikings side, obviously, the whole year their biggest issue was their defense, more so their secondary, and that was again, the problem. I think you mentioned that the third down for the Giants was they were converting them all day. I mean, obviously the last play for Cousins was confusing, but I mean he was great up until that point. I mean, we don't know because if you watch the play, I think it was Dexter Lawrence beat the left guard, and so if Cousins waited one more second, he was going to get sacked or at least heavily pressured. So, but I mean, even then, like, you just have to throw the ball up. Like when the game's on the line like that, you can't just and he threw it to the inside to Hawkinson. If he threw it to the outside, there was at least a small chance Hawkinson could have broken a tackle to get the first down. But he threw it inside where I think it was Xavier McKinney already was, and so that made it even worse. But I mean, Cousins was still really good. I mean, giving up 31 points defensively I think that's a pretty clear problem. And I know a lot of Vikings fans want their defensive coordinator fired, so we'll see if they move on from him or not. But credit, I think it's Adoree Jackson. I think I saw a stat like he was on Justin Jefferson for 85% of the snaps, and he limited him. I mean, he only had 7 catches for 47 yards, and I think 2 or 3 of those catches came in that for opening touchdown drive that they have. So he only had 4 or 5 catches the rest of the game. So credit to them because those are 2 big guys that they didn't have a few weeks ago when they last played was Xavier McKinney and Adoree Jackson. They didn't have either of those guys the last time they played. So those 2 are definitely 2 big difference makers. Cousins was not sacked, but there was still a lot of pressure, all game on him. And yeah, the Vikings secondary just, flopped again like that, like they really have all season long. So that's really the big, question mark for the Vikings this offseason is addressing the defense because, they once were, really a run heavy defensive first, type of team back when they had, Adrian Peterson back in his prime. And now they're, a pass heavy team with a bad defense. So that will definitely have to be addressed. This offseason for the Minnesota and like the Giants move on. They're really playing with house money at this point. Shout out to Isaiah Hodgins, who has really stepped up into a big role for the Giants this past month and a half. I thought on that last drive when Darius Slayton had that drop and the Vikings were going to get the ball back down 7, and then they had that highly questionable roughing the passer call. I thought for sure at that point the Vikings were going to at least tie the game. So shout out to the Giants defense for hanging tough even through, that tough call where Cousins still had the ball in his hands. And I guess they called it because he threw him down hard, but that didn't seem like the right call at that point. But yeah, I mean, the Giants held on. You mentioned that they were probably the most popular, lower seed to be picked. I mean, it wasn't really an upset. It was like a 3-point spread, so I don't really consider it an upset. But they were the most popular, 6 seed. I mean, there's only 2 6 seeds, but they're the most popular lower seed to pull off the win, and they did just that. And we had question marks with the Vikings, especially late in the year when the Packers crushed them late in the season, and that kind of continued into the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely the Vikings. We talked about how they recently had some games where their offense was not pretty at all, and we talked about that Packers game where they just got beat down left, right, and center on the road against Green Bay in the second to last week of the season, and then obviously resting the starters against the Bears in their final game of the season, and then getting ready for this Giants team. And look, the Giants, obviously even though they lost to the Eagles when they were resting their starters, it looked like it was a competitive game, and the Eagles definitely had something to play for. So it's not like the Eagles, were just coasting when they won. They're trying to win the number one seed overall and have that first round bye. So, so pretty much, you definitely said it right there. The Giants, definitely one of the more scarier teams. You said they're playing with house money right now, and it's kind of crazy that the Giants' trajectory every time they have made the playoffs recently, it's either they lose in the wild card or they go all the way to the Super Bowl. So I guess we'll see what happens this year with a crazy first round. Now they got to play the Eagles on the road, and that could be an interesting game. I believe the Giants are, I think, 7.5-point underdogs. I believe I don't know what the full spread is. I think it's 7.5, but that the old story goes, it's hard to beat a team three times in one season, even though yes, the Niners just did, but it was a close game, people. It was a close game at first. But yes, definitely an exciting game for the Giants as they, continued their path into the divisional round against the Eagles, who had the extra rest, and the Vikings, they go into the offseason thinking, what do we do to better the defense, especially the secondary? They made Daniel Jones look like the next Joe Montana, and then trying to stop the run as well, because even with limiting Saquon to a little bit, I mean that Statue of Liberty play was absolutely beautiful, but Daniel Jones was still able to scramble out, and there was a play, I believe it was the touchdown pass, where it was a fake to Saquon. He scrambled out to his left, cross-body throw. That's just something that Daniel Jones has definitely improved a lot this year. So it was great to see the Giants, kind of an underdog all season. Really, a lot of people counted them out per se. Not only get to have a great season, but have a playoff win and carry that momentum into a divisional matchup on the road against the Eagles next week. And then finally, ending the Sunday slate in a game where, people kind of thought it was going to be a lot closer than last week. But, I mean, when you talk about close, I mean, the Ravens had not one, but two opportunities to pretty much either tie this game or make this game be very interesting. We talk about, first, it's all about that 99-yard 6-point swing. The Ravens were right there. I thought it was really close. I didn't even see where the ball was, and then all of a sudden, I think it was Sam Hubbard just start running the other way, and I'm like, does he have the football? I was confused, but that 6-point swing pretty much was the difference maker, and the Bengals didn't really do that much offensively, but they did just enough. And even on the last play, I think it was 4th and long for Tyler Huntley, and he threw that downfield, and it almost, I forgot who the receiver was in the back of the end zone, but
I think it was Prochet.
I think it was, but even he had a pretty decent shot of just snagging that ball. So this game was pretty much really low scoring. I kind of expected it to be a little more low scoring. Joe Burrow didn't have the most electric game, and the run game was pretty stalled for the most part. I mean, Mixon didn't even have over 50 yards, so so definitely the run game was not really moving at all. And the offense is something that the Bills have leaned on all season, and their offense did not really show up, honestly. I mean, even though the Ravens were barely converting third downs, the Ravens' run game showed up, and that's what the Ravens do. We know that's what the Ravens do. Their run game showed up. I mean, J.K. Dobbins, even though they didn't get into the end zone, Dobbins, Huntley, and Edwards, they were still doing what they do with that offense with the option play. And, even though it was a close game for the most part. The two turnovers by the Ravens, I mean, especially that fumble recovery, pretty much was the difference maker in this game. Ari, look, I feel like it's crazy that the Bills and Bengals have been like two of the biggest teams that everyone's talking about Super Bowl contenders. And those are the two teams that got exposed this weekend. I mean, the Bills with the turnovers and the Bengals with not really any offense going. The run game wasn't going. And, Joe Burrow's arm wasn't really the Joe Burrow that we've seen since last year. And then the Ravens, I feel like if Lamar would have played, I feel like the Ravens definitely would have pulled off the upset on the road. And who knows what could have happened in reality, but the Bengals did not show up, and I feel like that could definitely be a big red flag going into a loud Buffalo Bills atmosphere where the fans are so passionate, and this is the rematch of the game that we should have got before obviously the whole DeMar Hamlin situation happened, and they only played for about a couple drives, so we really don't even know what could have happened in that game. And now we are getting that for the next one. We'll talk about that later on this week. But talking about this game right now, are you a little more concerned about the Bengals' chances now that their offense pretty much got exposed for not really having a dominant run game last week, and no, excuse me, on Sunday, and the pass game wasn't really getting anything going? What do you think of the Bengals winning? Obviously now with the whole Lamar Jackson situation potentially, what do the Ravens address in the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned with the Bills divisional matchups, I'm not super worried. Like, this past week is, ultimately irrelevant to what's going to happen this upcoming week. But I mean, when we were previewing this game last week, I was talking about Tyler Huntley and how, last season he started a few games and he looked, competent, like he could keep the Ravens offense afloat, and how we hadn't seen that from him this season in the games he started. But this game from Huntley was what we saw from him last season. Using his legs a lot more, the run play out, the RPOs, the play action, finding his tight ends, like Mark Andrews had a pretty big game, finding his tight end in the middle of the field, with the run game opening up that, play action. So this is what I was expecting from Huntley, kind of all season. And you mentioned it's really a 14-point swing because it went from a Ravens up 7 to Bengals up 7 by like a matter of inches, really, because it was like probably like inside the 1 yard line where he got where the ball was fumbled. But yeah, I mean, obviously hindsight's 2020. You can question everything all you want, but J.K. Dobbins did express his frustration after the game about him not getting the ball there at that 1 yard line. You mentioned his big game. I think he had 13 for 62, so almost 5 yards per carry. He was having his way, as was Huntley and Gus Edwards for the most part on the ground. And so, Dobbins, before his ACL tear, was a pretty good running back, in those short yardage, goal line situations. And so, and the Ravens had all the momentum at that point if they took the lead there 24-17. So, obviously, like you said, you can have all these what ifs, but that doesn't matter because what happens, what happened, and we're getting a Bengals Bills rematch that we were hoping to have before the situation. A few weeks ago to DeMar Hamlin. Obviously now it's going to be in Buffalo now, not Cincinnati, but still, I do think that both teams will rebound all in all, and we'll get the kind of game that we are expecting out of the Bengals and Bills, in terms of a shootout, high scoring, exciting, close game, and all of that. I've heard that there could be some sort of weather issues, but at this point, who knows? Like we were. Based on the weather people all week, this last week, it would have been a monsoon during the game of the Seahawks 49ers, and that wasn't the case, obviously. So, I don't know how much weather can even affect these two offenses either. So, like you said, we'll get into those later in the week, but it should be an exciting, kind of rematch between the Bengals and Bills. And then with the Ravens, I guess, with Lamar Jackson, it sounds like unless a huge change comes, he's probably going to be on a new team, whether that means they franchise him and trade Lamar, or he just leaves in free agency. I don't know, but I mean, obviously a lot can change in the offseason, so maybe Lamar does resign, but I don't know if the Ravens are going to give him that long-term deal that he wants. So it definitely will be interesting to see if he returns or goes to a team like the Jets, who could look to address quarterback this option as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what the Ravens are going to do to either boost the offense around Lamar Jackson or trade him and ship him off. I think like the live odds just came out of where Lamar Jackson's going, and the Jets right now are the favorite. And I feel like those two teams have been linked a lot in the offseason. The Jets, they are literally a quarterback away from being a playoff team and being for real. And that's exciting. And I know that, the offense could definitely use a quarterback who can also run and, throw the ball well. And, we'll see what the Ravens are willing to do with Lamar Jackson this offseason. That's going to be one of the focal points is pretty much of the whole offseason is where Lamar Jackson will end up, whether it's back in the purple for Baltimore, or if it's somewhere else on another team. We'll find out and see. And then for the Bengals, obviously, I feel like this was just, one of those games where you kind of just survive in advance, and that's what they did. You mentioned the 14-point swing. It could have been Ravens up by 7, but then it was Bengals up by 7. And, that just kind of happens in games. What happens. But, at the end of the day, was still definitely an entertaining game to cap up the Sunday night slate. And, definitely excited to see Bills-Bengals next week. We talked about the weather, but, the Seahawks and Niners almost played in the sun for the whole second half. So the weather can change at any point. And then we finally end this wild card weekend with an absolute beatdown on Monday night, unfortunately. I despise the Cowboys, and it's just hard to see them just beat the Bucs defense left, right, and center. This was the best the Cowboys have played all season, and I will even with their win against the Colts when they put up 50, I still feel like this is one of the best wins fully from this Cowboys team. The defense, all the Buccaneers needed to do was establish the run, and they could not figure out that at all. Tom Brady had to throw 66 passes. He had to throw 66 passes because the run was inexistent. And then, Dak Prescott throwing for having 5 total touchdowns, throwing for 4, running for 1. He definitely lit up the field. This was the comeback game that everyone was kind of expecting of Dak, because he needed that, especially after the horrible season he's had, leading the league in interceptions and, having that pick 6 against Washington, and then the one against Jacksonville, to not throwing any interceptions last night, 5 total touchdowns, having a great completion percentage, over 300 yards passing. This was Dak's best game. But, I mean, we got to talk about the good and the ugly. And Brett Maher, oh my God, was he ugly. I don't usually go into kickers, but, I mean, you're 0 for 4. That's, for some people, that obviously mattered because it was for the over, I believe, and the under of the game. And, that's 4 points, and that could have been the over, the difference maker. But, I mean, my God, Brett Maher. What? I mean, when it's bad when your quarterback is yelling to go for 2 because he knows that you're going to miss the kick. But, I mean, from the get-go, this game was all Dallas. I mean, Tom Brady's offense could not do anything. Even with the garbage time that they had, they could not do anything. Bucs get beat down, and the Cowboys move on to play San Fran. It sucks that one team has to win that game, but what's making me happy is that one team is going to lose. And whoever that team is going to lose, I will be clowning them so hard. And so, but that's another conversation for another time. Ari, look, we talked about this last week. This game was both of these teams really recently stumbled into the playoffs. The Buccaneers, coming off that loss where they rested most of their starters, and the Falcons' run defense was no, the Falcons' run offense was running through the Bucks, and they finished under 500, and then the Cowboys obviously they had their rough game even with the starters playing Washington, where Sam Howell was just absolutely dissecting the defense en route to their win to end the season. But Dak proved us all wrong, and he had himself his best game of the season. The offense was really moving downfield. What was your reaction from the Cowboys beatdown last night, and then obviously Brett Maher? I mean, you got to find someone else. You got sign someone who is right. Sign that destroying guy. I mean, sign him for God's sakes. But I mean, and then obviously, just what do you think now for the Buccaneers with probably Tom Brady playing his last game as a Buck? Where does he go? So many questions for the Bucks, but what were your reactions from this game last night?
Yeah, I mean, it started out with 4 straight 3-and-outs where they were struggling to even gain positive yards on, one play. And then the Cowboys' third drive, they finally found some rhythm offensively, and that led to the Dalton Schultz touchdown. And then it looked like the Bucs were responding back. They were driving the field themselves that next drive, and I think they were like at the 5 or inside the 10, and Brady looked like he was throwing the ball away, and he threw an interception, which was his first red zone pick in like 3 years, as the announcers were consistently saying right before that happened that he has not thrown a red zone pick since I think it was like 2019, and there it was. But yeah, I mean, after that pick by Brady in the end zone, it all went downhill for the Bucs the rest of the game, pretty much until garbage time, where they're already getting crushed at that point. Yeah, I mean both run games struggled, but the Cowboys still got they at least ran the ball more times, like volume wise, and so that led to more yards. And then Dak was arguably the best overall quarterback of the weekend with the 300 yards passing and 5 total touchdowns. He clearly he threw no picks, which was a big thing as well, because I think he led the NFL in picks during the regular season, or at least he was up there, obviously, if you didn't lead the league. But now they get the 49ers, which we'll talk about later in the week, which will be obviously a tough test for both teams. But as for, I guess we'll get into Brady next. Based on, it seems like obviously you can't count anything out, but it seems like you said, he's played last game for Tampa Bay. Whether it feels hard to believe that he wants to end on that note, even though he certainly can. He has nothing really else to prove really at this point. But it sounds like he's either going to be retired or he's going to be playing for a new team. The team I've heard most likely is the Raiders, which kind of makes sense with them moving on from Derek Carr. What's kind of your prediction on what happens to him, whether he retires or plays for a new team?
Yeah, I was definitely going to say the same thing. I mean, you could say he's going to retire, but the way he went out against when he was in New England, remember that game against the Titans, he went out badly. I mean, it was the pick 6 that sealed it, and New England loses on their home turf in the wild card round. Oh wow, doesn't that sound familiar? Against a team that they, it was a home game for Tom Brady. Oh, that sounds familiar. And it was a wild card game. Oh, that sounds familiar. And it was the last year of his deal. Oh, that sounds familiar. And he was talking about his next adventure. Oh, that sounds a little familiar as well. And I feel like his time in Tampa Bay has officially ended. In the NFL, though, I don't know. I feel as if we've talked about the Raiders, and I know, or I believe that the Raiders are going pretty much all in for Tom Brady. I've also heard, unfortunately, San Francisco, the 49ers, I've heard their name as well. I think they may go after Brady, but who knows? They may stick with Brock Purdy. They may go back to Trey Lance after he fully recovers, and obviously Jimmy G is probably going somewhere else. So Tom Brady, I feel like he has options. I even heard Miami potentially, because there was that that leaked information that Miami was trying to get Brady after his time in New England. So that Miami's always going to be a possibility, but they may stick with Tua depending on what the doctors say. But for Brady, I don't think his time in the NFL is done yet. They may. I feel like the Raiders are definitely the favorite because of everything that's going on with Derek Carr. They benched him for the final 2 games, and it's seeming that Derek Carr is already processed that his time in Las Vegas is done and his time as a Raiders is done, and the Raiders are looking for their new quarterback. And I feel like they are in a win now situation where they may re-sign Josh Jacobs because he was on his last year of his deal and he had a great season. They still have Devontae Adams, who they just signed the mega contract to. They still have Chandler Jones. They still have Darren Waller. They still have, some good pieces to build around. And I feel like the Raiders just really need to have that quarterback and improve defensively. But, definitely the quarterback will be one of their biggest addresses this offseason. And I've heard that the Raiders are going to go all in. So I feel like Brady to the Las Vegas Raiders will probably happen. If not, then he'll probably retire, or we'll see what happens with Tom Brady. That's going to be definitely one of the bigger questions of the whole NFL offseason. What is going to happen with Tom Brady if he is going to retire? But a lot of speculation coming from his post-game press conference last night means that his time in the NFL probably isn't done, but his time in Tampa Bay is. And now it's going to be a lot more different because obviously now he's divorced with his wife, and now he has to share custody with his kids. So it's not like he has to choose a prime location for his family. It's more about where he wants to end his career. And maybe Vegas will definitely be that spot to play under Josh McDaniels again. So that'll be interesting to see as we head into the offseason. But we definitely have some great football left in the week. I just looked up a tweet from the NFL, and from every starting quarterback in the NFL in this divisional round, all 8 of them are under 30. And that is crazy to me. Like, there's no Brady. There's no, old veteran leadership like an Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson. This is the next generation. And it goes from as young as 23 with Brock Purdy and Trevor Lawrence all the way up to 29 with Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott is the oldest quarterback in the divisional round, which is absolutely insane to me. So, the next generation's here, and I'm definitely excited to see it. But, Ari, do you have anything else you want to say?
No, yeah, we'll get into the divisional games later this week. And yeah, we'll preview those games probably Thursday or Friday.
Well, we want to thank you guys for tuning into another episode of AKP Sports Talk. Don't forget, please like, comment, share, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. We're just having fun. We're taking time out of our day to talk about something that we love, and that's sports. And we love all of the support that you guys give us. So thank you guys for tuning in. We will see you guys later in the week for our predictions for the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. Thanks, guys. See you guys later.